Excellent. Okay, I believe we are now streaming. It'll be just a moment before it pops up on YouTube and I can verify. Looks like there's a couple people in the stream already. Hello. As I did last time, I'm going to try to monitor both the YouTube chat and the shout box on our forums. Get my windows all organized. Yay! Okay. I haven't seen it pop up yet. Oh, let's just start chatting. Yeah. Oh, I've been having a little bit of a cough today, and I hope it's not as loud and obnoxious on the microphone. Ooh. We're not receiving data from your encoder. Okay. This event can't be featured, sure. But alright, we'll stop outputting and start it again. Alright, we're streaming again. Hopefully that is going to be better. Excellent. Well, it took a minute to get set up. Still better than live stream, I think. If I do that, no. I still get a little doubling of my voice, and I wish I could turn that off, but I'll just have to learn to ignore it. So, we're here to talk about what makes an interesting kaiju biography. We do a lot of original characters. We're building a lot of things. Wait, I have an idea. If I... No, where's my main mixer? Volume mixer. If I could find there. Can you still hear me? Somebody type to let me know if you can hear me, because I've just turned off the audio for my stream. So hopefully that didn't turn the audio off for you. Yes? Somebody respond. No. Oh, good. Excellent. Well, that makes it a little easier for me. So, we have people chatting in both boxes. That's good. Apparently, my first link was incorrect. I apologize for that. How to write an interesting kaiju bio. Let me just, first of all, explain what a bad bio is. And this is, I'm talking about kaiju bios, but really this is about any sort of writing. If you have ever spent time with a small child, maybe 5 years old, and they tell you something, children are terrible at telling stories, right? They're very enthusiastic, which is good, but they'll say things like, well, first I wanted to do this, and then I thought about it, and then I decided not to do it, and then I was wearing my red shirt, and then I walked down the street, and then I looked up and I saw a bird, but then I walked down the street further, and I got the thing, and then I was thinking that, like, they're relating a series of events. But a series of events is not a story, right? A series of events can be really boring. a series of events, in order to turn it into a story, you need to have an arc, right? You want to start somewhere and you build somewhere, and you want there to be some initial motivation that starts you, and you want that motivation to carry you through so that at the end you have a resolution that is related to your impetus, right? The thing that started you out. So I just saw Wonder Woman. I guess it was a week ago now that I saw it, but I thought it was really good. It was really good, bordering on great. One of the things that made it really good is the impetus for Wonder Woman leaving the island is Steve Trevor arrives, right? That creates there, and so she's leaving because of what he's trying to do, and she's trying to help him and resolve the problem that brought him to the island initially, right? So all those things are related. Like, if he showed up and she was already about to leave that day, and then she had a different thing, and then she just happened to be involved in the war, like, it wouldn't be a story in the same sort of good, cohesive way that it is. And then the resolution ties into why he came to the island. The resolution ties into why she wanted to leave the island. The resolution turns into her origin. It's really good. So we want to aspire, when we're writing our stories, we want our stories to be cohesive and make sense. We want all the elements to work together. And when there's something in your story that doesn't relate to the main arc of your story, you should probably cut it, right? So a good story is necessarily as short as possible, right? So let's talk about some good kaiju bios. Godzilla. Godzilla is a great character, and a big part of what makes Godzilla so good is that he's a reaction to Japanese dealing with nuclear bombs, right? Nuclear bombs are dropped on civilian populations in Japan. Hasn't happened to anybody else, right? It's this unprecedented, crazy thing that just happened. Nobody knew it was going to happen. It happened, and suddenly they're trying to deal with it, and nobody else really understands with it. They can't fight it off. They can't undo it. It's something that they have to deal with, right? And that's exactly what Godzilla is. Godzilla is this thing that appears and it destroys them, right? And so those parallels are strong. And so the same way they have to deal with Godzilla is the same way they have to deal with the fact that they've been, had these nukes dropped on them. Yes, you want to have a character whose their origin is related to what the character wants. It's related to the actions the character is going to take. I was having a conversation earlier where we had, so let's see, Agridora, right, which is a character I quite like that we've designed. There was a piece of Agridora's story that just kind of ruined a lot of it, which is Agridora is this chimera monster. It's a bunch of monster bits that get stitched together, okay? And there's a sort of a redemption story in there, because Agridora is originally a very aggressive, mean, kind of King Ghidorah-style vanguard, alien invasion, world-destroying monster. But then the Agridora transforms and becomes a more defensive, protective, friendly monster, right? And part of that is about getting ripped apart and then being put back together and then having this sort of like life-giving force. And so in the story for Agridora, we say Agridora was defeated by some other monster. So Agridora is this big, horrible, it had a different name, but it had, this big evil thing, but it got defeated by some other kaiju and ripped into pieces, and then those pieces got stitched back together. But when we did that, we implied that there was some other bigger, nastier thing that could rip you to pieces. And so, let's say 50% of all the discussion about Agridora was about, what is that other monster? Who is that? Can we talk about that monster? That sounds like the better monster. And so, when we defined this monster Agridora, we inadvertently left this hole, a monster-sized hole. And so, by defining one monster, we just created a hole where now another monster had to be defined. And you see how if we repeated this process, we would never finish. So, having things that you're not going to fully talk about, having things that aren't going to be finished, it really it kind of broke the arc of that story, which was unfortunate because we didn't have to talk about that other monster. We didn't have to mention that. We could have started with Agridora was this big, huge monster who met an unfortunate end and was going to rot at some great. We don't have to indicate that there was some important fight, because in fact that fight was not important, right? The fact that Agridora was bad and becomes good, like, that's the key. That's what we need to focus on. and focusing on a whole bunch of things that Agridor did when Agridor was evil doesn't has nothing to do with the transformation, right? The transformation definitionally occurs after all of that stuff. So we kind of shot ourselves in the foot a little bit there. So specifically for kaiju combat, there are certain balances that we use. So if anyone's looked at, there's a bunch of infographics about this, but Godzilla's height has changed over the years. So Godzilla was initially about 50 or 60 meters, and then Godzilla got up to about 100 meters. Godzilla currently is about 120 meters. And part of the reason for that is simply the height of buildings in Japanese cities, right? So Godzilla needs to be in among the buildings, right? And if Godzilla is half as tall as the buildings, Godzilla doesn't look very big. And in the 50s and 60s, the buildings in Tokyo weren't especially tall. They were 50 or 60 meters. Then they were 100 meters, so Godzilla had to get bigger and bigger and bigger to continually tower over the city, right? But this also means that when Godzilla fights monsters, those monsters need to fit in scale to Godzilla's size, right? And so Anguirus needs to be, needs to be as Godzilla as a large dog is to a human, right? So there's a relationship there. King Ghidorah needs to tower over Godzilla and be bigger and more threatening, right? Because you need several monsters to defeat King Ghidorah. So King Ghidorah's height doesn't matter. Like, you tell me the meters, that doesn't matter at all. What matters is that King Ghidorah is larger than Godzilla, right? And so every time Godzilla gets bigger to fit with the buildings, you just scale up King Ghidorah, because King Ghidorah has to be bigger than Godzilla. Like, that's an important part of the relationship. So when people are designing monsters, I always put down a specific height and weight for the monsters because it's part of the stats and it's exciting. But when you all are designing monsters and writing down a biography and trying to come up with stats for your monsters and so forth, writing down a specific height and or weight is sort of pointless, right? Because those numbers aren't important. What matters is the relationship of your monster to other monsters, specifically to Godzilla and other sort of like averagey monsters. Is your monster small and speedy? Is your monster tall and gangly? Is it incredibly fat? Is it slow moving? Does it burrow underground? Does it fly? Like, those are the things that are important. And from all that, I will scale it to tell you the right height to meet all those goals. If you, when you're writing a story, try to give me a bunch of specifics, that prevents me from making your kaiju the way you want it to be, right? For example, if you say my kaiju is, loves to run circles around opponents and throw some sort of like acid globs on them and just kind of stay at range and just pelt them with these acid globs, right? That makes perfect sense. I get it. If you say my character is resistant to fire damage and only deals this kind of damage, and you just give me a bunch of answers, you haven't really told me the important thing, right? The important thing is I have a particular combat tactic that I like. That's the core of my character, and that's what you want to describe. You don't want to describe a bunch of specifics. My character, when they take a step, their stride is exactly this long, and it takes this many seconds for their foot to hit the ground and then for the next foot to hit the ground. Their reach is exactly this long. This is the exact color of their green scales, and then they have some blue scales that are exactly this color. And like, all that sort of stuff, it has the appearance of information, but it doesn't convey the story, right? So when you're writing, don't give me any specifics. In fact, let me give some examples here. Specific information breaks your story. I don't need to know it. What I want to hear is all the important stuff, right? And I can fill it in. You have a lot of stories say a young man traveled from his village. Okay? What is a young man? What age? If I said a 31-year-old traveled from his village, right? That's less good. That's a less good story than a young man. So I just turned 41. So if I hear a young man, I'm like, okay, 20 to 30, that's all young, because it's younger than me, and that's fine. But a 14-year-old, they hear a young man, they might be thinking 14, 15, because, oh, young, more like me. And sometimes, people want to make characters more like them or sometimes not like them. If I were much older, I'd say, oh, a young man could be, a huge range. But allowing me to decide how old the character is, allowing me to get kind of a picture and an idea of how young they are and what their motivations are, that allows me to participate in the story. I'm able to put a little bit of myself in it, which makes me like the story more, right? And if you tell me a 31-year-old man with this shoe size from this village, and these are his parents' names, and he has no siblings, but he has a friend named this, and he was like, all of those details, they didn't make the story richer, right? You just gave me a bunch of stuff that I'm not going to remember, that is kind of hitting me, that just brings me further and further back from what you're saying. But when you can use slightly ambiguous terms, like young man, that brings me into what you're saying. So when you're describing your character, when you're describing the situation, use ambiguous terms. Ambiguous terms are stronger than specific terms. Sometimes people like to brag. They're like, "Oh, I've figured out everything about my monster. Here's a bunch of data." But that's not important because the data doesn't convey your story, right? What conveys your stories are interesting relationships, ambiguous terms, and an arc that kind of like resolves itself in a pleasant way. So let's give you let's do this. Let's do this well a couple of times. Somebody give me a concept, just a very some concept like video game monster or giant nose. I don't know, something. I could come up with it, but I'm hoping somebody. Yeah, someone just say something and I'll just spin it out into an idea. Chocolate monster. Fantastic. Agent Draco says chocolate monster. Okay, so the monster is chocolate. Or does the monster like to eat chocolate? Or is the monster made of chocolate? A chocolate monster. So, if it's a mean monster, something people always want to know is how can I defeat it? And the idea that something is made out of chocolate, which is something that is good, I like that. So okay, so we're gonna have a monster who's made, or at least partially made, out of some sort of living sentient chocolate. Okay. So we're going to maybe tie it. Maybe let's say it's Ghirardelli's, which is a chocolate factory that is, I think, based in San Francisco. So we say, the Ghirardelli's chocolate factory was struck by a meteorite. Fortunately, nobody was hurt, but the entire chocolate warehouse was completely obliterated by this asteroid. There were unusual energy readings, and so nobody was allowed to get near it, and so all the chocolate sat in the presence of this asteroid undisturbed for several days before people were cleared to kind of go in. And by the time they got there, all the chocolate had sort of merged together into a blob that was kind of sliding around in this warehouse. Okay, so right. So let's finish the story. So the blob was like when they opened the doors, like the blob escaped and went out into the city, where it formed itself into a giant monster that has some visuals. And it began like smearing chocolate everywhere and destroying things and leaving a delicious wrath of destruction until it finally reached the ocean, where it dissolved into the water and is presumed gone, but maybe it'll return someday. Okay? So, chocolate monster, you want to be made of chocolate, you want to have some ideas. Chocolate will dissolve in water. Chocolate kind of melts and reforms together. Chocolate leaves a mess everywhere it goes. And the fact that it was formed and it has some, some alien, mysterious, some energy, doesn't matter, right? But something formed it, it got out, it was sort of mean, it went into the ocean, maybe it dissolved in the ocean, or maybe that will do something else, right? But it acted like chocolate, right? And so we say, oh, it was chocolate at the beginning, and it was chocolate at the end. So we understand that sort of chocolate arc. It was an accident. There was something bad happened, and a lot of people were injured, and now it's over, but we don't know how we might protect ourselves in the future. But, is chocolate to blame? Are people afraid of chocolate? Will they look suspiciously at chocolate? There we go. Okay, another thing. Alien jellyfish. Okay, so what makes a jellyfish? Jellyfish is translucent. It has that sort of semi-medusoidal movement style. And so an alien jellyfish, I'm going to say it moves between the stars, right? Flies around between planets like this big, creepy thing. Uh, so an alien jellyfish, it's just hanging out in the stars, and so it's going to be encountered by some alien ship, or or a human explorer or something, right? So like a jellyfish is just sitting there. It's fine, right? It's just being a jellyfish, and so we need someone else to get it. The jellyfish isn't going to just come in. So they're going to find this giant alien jellyfish, and they get close and they try to engage with it, and it suddenly wraps around them and crushes the ship. And the ship is destroyed, but there's an escape pod, and they get back out. And then they send a bunch more ships to go and destroy this thing. Although clearly, it was provoked. They send a bunch of things to destroy it, and they shoot at it, but they can't destroy it because it's too rough. And so then they have to build some sort of mech thing that has like giant swords and goes out. It's able to cut the jellyfish into pieces, and they destroy the jellyfish in that way. But they're worried that since it seemed to be a biological thing, that there might be more, and that more might come. Okay, so again, jellyfish, individual jellyfish, not threatening. They don't do anything, and so I wanted to make the character not do anything, and it just sits there passively. However, if you've ever seen a swarm of jellyfish, that's terrifying because there's so many of them, and they sting you, and each sting maybe hurts just a little, but lots of stings aggregate together, and it's a big problem. So putting all those bits in the story. I didn't have to even barely describe the character. You don't have to give any sort of origin because it doesn't matter, right? Jellyfishing. Great, good contribution, 525. That touches me. Thank you. I'm so pleased. Right. Spinosauridae. I don't even understand what you mean. I mean, I'm familiar with the Spinosaurus, which is the dinosaur, but we already have several characters that are based on that. But I mean, that's really just a visual style. It's a particular kind of dinosaur. So you're saying, it's a monster that has this visual. I might as well say a monster with a fin or with a horn. That's not a lot. I hope you would have more when you're devising a character than saying like it's a monster with a horn. Nice. Yeah. All right. So I think I've said some of the bits. I could keep repeating it, but that's not really necessary. If we'd like to just flip over now into our general kaiju comment stuff, if there's any particular monsters that people want us to put a link out for, we can, yeah. Sinus Ring Kaiju, yeah, that unfortunately exists as well. Yeah, someone give me a link for some character, and we'll open it up and take a look at it, and specifically talk about the bio in relationship to everything that I've been talking about this morning. Now we wait. Nobody have the link. Oh, my mom is bugging me. She says, "Are you coming to your nephew's birthday party?" Yes, coming soon. Here we go. Trisosoka, the infected ex-god. Alright, so we've got a big facehugger, face mouth, green thing, tentacles coming out of the palms, and tentacles kind of generally rope around the body, very humanoid. Overview. So this is actually interesting. I gave the overview and the origin. That's something I like to separate. The overview is telling you what about the character is most important, and the origin is the story. So if the story is the part that's most important, then you have a little bit of an interesting challenge because the overview is going to give you, you're going to repeat your points, right, between those two. But the overview can be used for different things. Sometimes, like, the appearance is what's most important, so the overview is about the appearance. Sometimes the name is the most important thing. Sometimes the relationship to another character is the most important thing. So the overview is really, it's about identifying what is the most important thing. What's the key concept behind this. So Trisoska, I really want to say Trisoka, but there's another S, was one of the 7 gods of blah blah blah, who terrorized the human world before being sent back. Back to where? He, due to assumed betrayal, was banished to the same world they invaded with an infection that weakened him significantly. Showing signs of bloated areas of skin and pores filled with infected liquid, he is a sign of wear, as he also has pulsating vein-like entities squirming in and out of his body as he retains a sickly pale green skin tone. He relies on using his attacks to the fullest potential and managing his energy well, while using his energy regaining attacks to gain some help when needed. Those last 2 sentences are just... those are not important. One of the 7 gods of something who terrorized the human world and then was exiled. Boom. That's really all we need in the overview. So, origin here. It's a little long to read, but it's a fine length on the page. Trisoka in the past was a god who spread misfortune wherever he went. He was not prayed to and was generally feared by the people of old. He was said to be one of the 7 gods, a world beyond mortal conception. Okay, just the language there. He is said to be one of the 7 gods. I mean, that's so redundant, right? Just say he's one of the 7 gods of blah. That's our information, right? If that information is wrong, you can tell us in the future that it's wrong. But to tell us that we don't know, but our best guess is this, like, you can skip that. Just tell us our best guess. You don't need to codify those sorts of statements. And it makes you, it adds uncertainty in a place where it's the wrong kind of uncertainty. I said before that having ambiguity is good because it helps us understand, but that sort of conditionalization makes me feel like there's something else you're supposed to be telling me, or there's some other information that I need before I can understand what you're telling me now, but you're never going to give me that. So you just skip it. He's one of the 7 gods of blah blah blah, a world beyond mortal conception. Not important. The fact that I keep saying blah 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 instead of trying to pronounce that world, it's clearly beyond pronunciation. So the gods reigned over their realm and crossed over to ours to reign it as well. Okay, and so they did, as the world of man fell under great darkness, which lasted till the 7 gods were sent back to where they hailed from. There they disappeared from history and became nothing more than legends. Okay, so that's a fine setup. It's written with a lot of extra words. You can just say Trisoka was one of the 7 gods of the blah blah blah, who came to our realm to rule us. Period. Right? Under their rule, the world of man fell into great darkness, and only when they were finally banished, was that resolved. That's all we want to hear. However, that would not be the end of this tale. Again, you're just wasting our time. We know it's not the end of the tale because we're reading the tale, right? Saying this is the beginning of a paragraph. It's a sentence. Like we don't need it. Okay, so he was interested. That's an interesting word. Interested in the human race, as he wanted to see more of it, and this curiosity would lead him to separate from his fellow brothers to force his way into our world. Thus began the appearance of the god in random areas of the world, facing in and out of our world, so he could not stay in our world for long. A lot of repetition there with the words "our world." So you can say, so they came here, they ruled us, and they were exiled, and they left. Great. So we could say, however, Trisoka Trisoska was still interested in humans, and so he alone, among his brothers, continued to visit our world. Right? I think that says everything you said, but it keeps it going. Because, all right, so we have these 7 gods who come to Earth, they leave. So the question I have is, why did they leave? Right? So we'll get to that. But Trisoska is still interested, so he continues to come back. So now my other question is, well, what makes him different that he wants to come back, and what is he looking for when he comes back, right? So that's what I need. That's what I need to be answered in the next parts of the story. His brothers grew unhappy with him, and they began to notice the brothers going on behind their back and entering the mortal realm without telling them. He wanted to keep his right a secret. he was feared that his brothers knew they'd come forth. Eventually, they decided, okay, so we're getting their reaction to their relationship with him, which is good. Relationships are good, although it's not clear what that relationship is yet. Eventually, they decided to confront him, engaging in a fight afterwards where they overwhelmed Trisoska and defeated him. They take him to the pit of punishment, where they let the creator of their world decide his fate. The god of misfortune screeched in pain as the punishment was decided, an infection taking form and warming its way. Okay. Alright. Okay, so here we go. So let me recapitulate all this. So they've all left our world, but Trisoska is continuing to come back to peek. He's curious, okay? So his brothers discover that he's doing this. Start with that. Don't say with they're unhappy or they suspect or he's trying to hide it. Just say they discover that he's continuing to come back to our world and they decide to punish him. Right? This little bit, they let the creator of their world decide his fate. Who's that? Who's the creator of the world? That sounds like the big monster, right? So, but his brothers discover that he's continuing to visit Earth, and they punish him. They take him to the pit of punishment, and an infection takes him form, and blah blah blah. Okay, so I'm now getting the idea that he was one way. And now, because of his interest in Earth, because of our dimension, he's been transformed. He's been hurt somehow, right? He's got this infection. Okay, so that's good. So the three pillars of the story thus far, the only things that matter, right? There's a lot of detail we can just eliminate. The only things that matter are you had some people who came to Earth and then they left, but one of them wanted to keep coming to Earth against the group's wishes. The group found out that he was doing that, and they punished him, which changed him. Okay? Uh-oh. Well, okay. So, a twist. The six gods invaded the human world once again and terrorized it as they did this many years ago. I don't like it. I don't like that at all. I'll finish this, but then come back. However, as they took their pathway their brother used, they couldn't stay for long. They did manage to leave something behind. In their emergence, they made it their goal to make sure Trisoska stayed here, banishing him to the mortal world and cutting off his ties to his original realm. I don't like it. If he's not supposed to go back, then the punishment is they put him back here and leave him here. That makes no sense. Also, the implication that they didn't know how to get back, that he discovered this route and they get it, that's confusing. I don't need it. I think it's much cleaner if they were here and they decided to leave and they decided we're not going back there. So immediately, him going back there, we don't have to explain how. It's just he just does it, right? Because this is something they can do. But they've said we're not going to do that. And so he goes against their wishes and comes back. They discover it. They punish him. That's great. That's enough of a story because we have a relationship, we have a difference, and we have a motivation, right? Yes. Okay. So they punish him, and he's different, and he flees a final time back to Earth. Um, right. But they've disowned him. You're no longer our brother. We do this thing to you. We change you. We infect you, and now we don't care what you do because you're not one of us anymore. Maybe it took away some of his his other powers or whatever. And so he is now wounded, and he scrambles back to Earth to because it's comforting or to get away from them because he knows they won't go there. And so now we have this thing that is kind of resentful, that is on Earth. Was coming to Earth for curiosity, exploration reasons, but now is sort of stuck on Earth and is all messed up, and maybe blames Earth, blames his brothers, but also blames Earth, blames himself. That's an interesting kind of unresolved guilt that leads to a better story. So the story is not about this world that they come from, right? In fact, I want to know as little about that as possible. But there's a group of brothers, and they do things, and they kind of talk, and they're individuals, but they make decisions. But this one, Trisoska, is not participating in that group well, and gets punished for it, right? That's your story. That's the core. That's what I want, because that's something we all relate to. We understand being exiled from a group. We understand when our individual motivations or thoughts or desires or interests kind of conflict with the group. Yeah, that's really good. All right, it is my nephew's birthday party. So I'm going to cut this off here, and thank you all for joining in. I'm traveling again the next few days. Uh, Hopefully, we're going to have a bunch of kaiju reveals for you starting very soon. All right. Thank you very much. And how do I stop?